Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'll be reviewing Mickey 17, and in the second half, I'll be ranking my top 5 worst movies of 2024. So starting off with Mickey 17, I just want to say Bong Joon-ho is an excellent filmmaker. He recently became widely known once his film Parasite won Best Picture at the Oscars in 2020, and I think Parasite is frankly a masterpiece in my opinion. It's just so well made on every level. And it's easily one of the most planned out and carefully crafted movies I've ever seen. Just every detail in the movie is there. It just feels like someone made it with a complete vision from start to finish. And it's just like, I've never seen a movie that particularly well crafted. I've seen many well-made movies over the years, but that's like the one I think of when I'm thinking who really planned this out from start to finish? That's what Bong Joon-ho did with Parasite. It is an excellent film, one of the best I've ever seen, to be honest. And it's a great film for me too, because it's honestly what got me more interested in foreign cinema. Not to say that I never really had interest in foreign cinema, but I just kind of wasn't too interested in watching more of it when I was younger. I think I just kind of assumed a lot of people's subtitles are just kind of this burden, and it's a hurdle you have to get over, and I was I don't really want to do that. Even though I did watch movies with subtitles in English, it's just a weird stubborn American thing. I don't know why we do that here. But initially I didn't even have that much interest in this movie when it was first coming out, but it had so much good buzz that I just went on a solo trip to see it in theaters, and I thought it was amazing. Normally I wouldn't do that kind of thing. I wouldn't just go watch a movie I don't really have that much interest in, but word of mouth was amazing for this movie. And honestly, over the years, one of my biggest things is if I saw a movie got really good reviews, I would watch it even if I didn't think it looked good. I think I've said it on this podcast before, but Crazy Rich Asians is a great example of that, where I thought the trailers just looked like a bad comedy, and I went to see it because it had really good reviews, and as it turned out, I loved the movie. I think it's a great film. I bought it on Blu-ray. I've saw it a couple times in theaters. It's really great, and that's kind of, I think, maybe one of the movies that really got me also interested in just watching movies that maybe I wouldn't normally see just because people said it was good. But anyway, back to Parasite. After that movie, I began to delve into Bong Joon-ho's catalog. I still need to see a bunch of stuff from him, but I think he's great, and I was just so eager to see what he would make next. Mickey 17 has been sitting on a shelf for quite a while now at Warner Brothers. It was supposed to come out last year, and then it got pushed to January 2025, then April 2025, only to then get pushed forward back to March, so now it's released in theaters. And I was very excited. As I've repeatedly said, I love Bong Joon-ho, and then you have Robert Pattinson in this movie too, who is awesome as an actor. He's one of the most talented working today. He just has so much range. When you think of range, Robert Pattinson comes to mind too, because, he's done The Lighthouse, he did Good Time, Twilight, The Batman, and now this, and it's every time you see him, you can barely recognize the man, especially his voice, what he does with his voice in all these movies, if he just called you on a phone and did one of his voices, you would not know it's Robert Pattinson. Some people just have a signature voice, like a Morgan Freeman. You're hearing Morgan Freeman. Robert Pattinson, you literally could think it's 5 different actors talking, because especially if you see The Boy and the Heron, the dub of that movie, it's who is that? That's not Robert Pattinson. It's crazy. But Mickey 17, I thought the trailers looked good too. I really enjoyed the trailers. I was oh, that looks fun. I really want to see what this is about. And as a whole, I would say this movie is pretty good. It's admittedly disappointing when comparing it to the masterpiece that is Parasite, but it still has everything you'd come to expect in a Bong Joon-ho movie, and I say that in the best of ways. For one, it's a great-looking movie. Apparently, this movie cost over $100 million, and sadly, it will be a loss for Warner Brothers because not a lot of people are watching it. But at least you can tell the money went into making this movie feel and look as big as possible. The cinematography is great, the special effects are great, everything about it just feels very premium, especially, every Bong Joon-ho movie looks good generally. His earlier films I know had some weak CGI and stuff, but, those were lower budget. This is a very high budget movie, and now he actually has the toys to play with to make his movies come to life in the way that maybe he always envisioned it, and I think this looks great. This movie looks fantastic. I also think Robert Pattinson is excellent in not one but two roles in this movie. He has to play opposite himself for a lot of the film, and the fact that he's able to make his two selves very easy to distinguish is more impressive than words can describe. Like, I mean, it's very easy to say, like, oh yeah, this guy plays two roles in the movie, like Adam Sandler and Jack and Jill, for instance. But what Robert Pattinson does here is so brilliant, and he makes it very easy to tell the two apart, even though they're literally playing like the same character, but just a little bit different. And there's really not a lot of physical attributes to separate them either. Like they don't really, one of them usually like Jack and Jill again, for instance. I don't know why I'm going to compare this movie to Jack and Jill. Don't put this on the same quality as Jack and Jill, but that movie, it's like Adam Sandler's playing a boy and a girl, and it's very easy to tell which one's Jack and which one's Jill. In this movie, you got two Mickeys, and it's not like one has long hair or maybe like wears very different clothes either. It's just kind of like, they just act differently. They maybe have some different mannerisms, and that really adds a lot to this movie. I think Robert Pattinson just sells this role completely. And then rounding out the rest of the supporting cast, you have Naomi Ecki, Stephen Yeun, Anna Maria Bartolome, and Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette. They are all very good. I think Mark Ruffalo especially is having a lot of fun here. He's kind of doing an impression of a certain political figure right now. That's at least how I took it. And he did a really good job, though. Mark Ruffalo is always a lot of fun. And Toni Collette was also having a lot of fun here, too, as Mark Ruffalo's character's wife. And I just thought all the supporting cast did a really nice job. On a story level, however, that's where things in this movie get kind of interesting. This movie is based on a book, and I'm not sure how faithful it is. I haven't read the book, so, if this movie isn't faithful, I'm not really judging it on that. I'm just really judging it as how it is as a movie. But I do love the concept of this film, and it feels timely. Like, it feels like something we can watch now and kind of discuss with how the world is and where it's headed, perhaps. Bong Joon-ho certainly loves his social commentary. All of his movies have a lot of it. Some of them do kind of overlap. Like, he loves talking about class and, wealth and money. And while I'm not sure if this movie is saying anything entirely new, especially for Bong Joon-ho, it's still interesting. Like, it still has something to say that you can kind of be like, okay, that's pretty neat. And I think the first act of this movie is great. The way it sets the stage and fills the audience in on how Mickey got to where he is, and how he got into the circumstance is very interesting, and it's very funny and sad at the same time. I thought that was really well done and just really got me invested in this character and the story. And even as the movie got into the second act, it's entertaining and keeps you guessing about where it could possibly go, and you're just kind of like, where is this going? Where's this headed? Now we have all this setup, and I don't really, I'm trying to figure out where we could be going, especially because Bong Joon-ho really loves, like, twisting his movies around. Like, if you see his movies, like, sometimes he'll just throw a big twist at you, like Parasite especially, like, major twists going into the film, and, it's nothing like what you saw the first half. The thing, though, with Mickey 17 is as the movie kind of moves into the second act, and even into the third, I don't know, I found it surprisingly sloppy. Like, it just doesn't have a clear focus. The movie throws so many different things at you in the beginning, and where it ends up isn't really what I wanted or needed, per se. Like, sometimes, you watch a movie and you're like, this isn't really what I was hoping it would do, but then you watch it and you're like, you know what, I'm glad they did that. In this movie, I wasn't really, like, feeling either with where it went. I wasn't really, like, it was throwing me off with where it went, but I was like, I don't really know if this is the right choice here. Like, I don't know why we're focusing so much on this aspect of the story. It just kind of kept jumping around, too, with different plot lines and stuff. I just didn't really feel like it was focused, and I don't know if the book's like that, too. To me, it just felt kind of sloppy. And then, again, comparing it to a movie like Parasite, it was kind of like two different movies in one. Mickey 17 is sort of like that too, but the difference is I don't think it's nearly as well thought out or executed. Like, Parasite is, again, every detail is thought out, everything in the movie is, like, so planned out clearly and, well established. In this movie, though, in Mickey 17, I just didn't feel that entirely. Like, it's still very well made. Like, Bong Joon-ho does a fantastic job directing this movie. I just don't know if the script was quite there. I don't know if I really felt like it was the right story to tell with what they were going for. I just think it could have done something a little different. Not to say it's bad, not at all. I really did enjoy this movie quite a bit and had fun with it. I really had a good time watching it. I just know that it could have been better, and maybe that's a bit disappointing to kind of think about. And the other thing is, besides Mickey, I just didn't really care too much about the side characters here. I didn't really find many of them too memorable or interesting. But still, I do think this is an enjoyable movie. Bong Joon-ho clearly just wanted to make the biggest, craziest thing he could after winning the Oscar, and I respect him for it. I mean, Damien Chazelle did the same thing after La La Land. He went out and made Babylon, which was a big, box office bomb. But and Mickey 17 is kind of similar for that. It's just the biggest budget and just box office bomb. But you know what? He deserved it. He made a great, great film with Parasite, and this is his follow-up, and I still think it's a good movie. I mean, it's not as strong, but I think Bong Joon-ho just proves he's a great filmmaker, and I still can't wait to see what he does next. I'll always show up to his films. But, for Mickey 17, do I think it's a must-see? No. But I think if you are going to see this movie, you should really see it on the big screen while you can. Not only does it look great visually, and you can really tell where all the money went, but original movies like this need the money. And I just don't want Warner Brothers to take away the wrong message from this movie being made. I don't want them to look at this movie and say, like, see, this is why we can't make original movies, because this kind of stuff doesn't do well at the box office and no one wants to see it. I think people do want to see original movies. I just don't know if this really appealed to the masses. I don't really know what it is, like, that people just didn't really want to go out and see it. I was very curious because I loved Parasite, and I love Robert Pattinson, Bong Joon-ho, but I don't know. I mean, if you're going to see this movie, go see it in theaters or, stream it if you're not really too enthusiastic. But I do think it's worth watching if you are curious about it. I don't know. Overall, I'm going to give this movie a B. It's nothing great, but I did have a good time with it. Alright, and moving on, let's get into my top 5 worst movies of 2024. Look, as much as I love talking about my favorite movies of the year, I also feel like I should take a little time to discuss the ones I didn't love so much. The fact of the matter is, I do love movies, and I love talking about movies and thinking about movies, but I know how much work goes into making them, so I really don't, want to spend too much time crapping on other people's work. Like, I feel like these people who make these movies really put a lot of, hard time and hours into these things, and, I don't want to be the one, like, really pushing them down, but the thing is, I did watch some pretty bad movies last year, and I'm going to shout out a few that you can maybe check out if for some reason you're in the mood to watch something bad for a change. And I also just think part of film criticism is, talking about the great stuff, but also acknowledging the stuff that didn't work quite as well. And I think that's also just part of why I love watching movies, because it's so fascinating to watch the ones I love and then talk about why I love them, and then watch the ones that kind of sucked and be like, oh, this is why I didn't like it. So without further ado, let's get into my top 5 worst movies of 2024. Number 5, Pool Man. This was Chris Pine's directorial debut. He also starred in the movie alongside Danny DeVito and a few others. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I can barely remember anything about this movie besides being bored out of my mind for it. It's so bad. Like, I remember hating it. I just don't even remember much about the plot. And that's kind of like, I think that just kind of speaks to the whole movie of, like, you didn't like it, but you can't even remember why. And that's just kind of like the worst kind of movie. I remember watching it, hearing that people walked out of this movie at festivals, and I can see why. Like, it's just so boring. It's so bad. It's just nothing interesting happening in it. I just kind of blocked any memory of this movie from my brain. And I don't want to even get too much into it because of that. I really don't remember much about it, but it's just, I remember hating it. I remember thinking it was very bad, and that's all I'm going to say about Pool Man. Number 4, Kraven the Hunter. I'm not kidding when I say that my immediate thought walking out of this movie is that maybe I was being too harsh on Madam Web and Morbius. There's nothing good about this movie. I mean, I really wanted to like it. I always try to give Sony a chance to prove themselves with these Marvel movies they make, but they are awful. I don't know what they keep doing. It's like, I don't know if they just keep approving these terrible scripts or if they just interfere, like, constantly in post-production and just change the movie. That's what it feels like. It feels like more like Sony's just taking a movie that was fine and then just tweaking it to be worse. I don't know. The story here is just, it's terrible. It doesn't honor the character from the comics at all, which is a very interesting character. I mean, I think I really wanted Kraven to be the villain of Spider-Man No Way Home, but in this movie, he's nothing like the character that I wanted. Aaron Taylor Johnson is clearly trying his best, and I respect the actor, but the awful writing and ADR this movie does him no favors. Same with Ariana DeBose, who's like literally an Academy Award-winning actor. She also just looks terrible in this movie, and I think that just kind of goes to how bad this movie does, like, it just doesn't make anyone look good. And I mean, speaking of not looking good, the CGI is terrible, the action is really cartoonish, the movie's also so boring and maybe you want to fall asleep. Like, I remember the first like 30-40 minutes is basically just this long prologue that didn't really give me anything interesting out of it, and then the rest of the movie is just nothing happening. And I think even similar to Pullman, I don't even remember that much of the plot here. I just remember being really bored by it and not wanting to see what happened next. And I think that just, again, speaks to what this movie does. Madam Web was at least kind of funny bad in some areas. Morbius is pretty similar to Kraven, just I think at least Morbius tries a little harder with what it's doing. Kraven was just more offensive to me on a character level, on a story level. I hated this movie. Kraven's so bad. I really hope this is the end of the Sony Marvel Universe thing they're doing with the villains. Unless they get great writers in the future, great filmmakers. I mean, these are pretty decent filmmakers behind these movies. I don't know what's happening, but unless they can fix it, I don't want to see any more of these. Number 3, Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. I'm a huge SpongeBob fan, so when something is done poorly with the characters, I get mad. I've been pretty tapped out of SpongeBob since the show became practically unwatchable in my opinion, and no, it's not because I've grown out of it, I promise you that much. I watch old episodes all the time. I literally watched one last night, and I still find them hilarious. I literally could watch Band Geeks for like a 10-hour loop, and I would laugh every time I watch it. I love the first movie, and I really don't mind the second one either. And I literally went to a SpongeBob panel at Comic-Con, which was awesome. So that just kind of tells you how big of a SpongeBob fan I am. But, oh my god, this movie is bad. Like, the Sandy Cheeks movie, oh my god, it's so bad. I watched this movie after seeing the Borderlands movie in theaters, and I thought that was really bad. And I was like, oh, you know what? If I watched the Sandy Cheeks movie afterwards, which I heard was also very bad, I was like, maybe I won't be as harsh on it. Frankly, I think I hated it even more than Borderlands, which would probably make a top 10 worst movies of the year. This movie's just so offensive to me as a fan of the show. The characters are so poorly written. They're not even, like, close to who they are in the show that I remember loving as a kid. And the story makes no sense. The comedy is cringeworthy. And the villain is laughably bad. And the movie is filled with so many plot holes that, like, make no sense. Like, the whole movie just makes no sense when you think back on it. Like, why did this happen? Why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? It's a headache. This movie is just a headache, and it feels like AI generated in the worst way. I don't know what they did with SpongeBob here and the whole cast, and I don't know why anyone signed up for this. It just feels like a movie that was made with no passion for the characters, and that's really frustrating. Not to mention that this movie is paced so much for TikTok kids that there's almost no time to even get settled into the movie before the plot gets going. Like, I literally think it was like one song to introduce the movie, and then like not even like 5 or 10 minutes into the movie, like things already get going, and you're like, what? We barely even got here. Like, what's going on? It's such a bad movie. Number 2, Unfrosted. I say this as a fan of Jerry Seinfeld and most of the cast here. What the heck happened here? Like, seriously, I don't think I've seen a comedy this dull and painfully unfunny since maybe Tammy, and this might be worse than Tammy. Sadly, Melissa McCarthy is in both of these movies, but she's a very talented actor. I won't, not to discredit her in any way, she really does try, but oh my god, this movie's bad. It's not even the kind of comedy that's memorably bad, like an Adam Sandler comedy. It's just awful references to stuff most people probably won't even find that funny. Like, do you love references to cereal? Apparently, if you do, you'll love this movie, because that's all this thing is. It's like references to cereal, old sodas, and like random stuff from like several decades ago that you probably don't remember. I just don't know what this movie was thinking. I'm not even sure what Jerry Seinfeld was thinking. He directed this movie, so he clearly has passion for it, and a fake story about how the Pop-Tart was created could be fun if you make it ridiculous enough and maybe, like, actually poke some fun at, maybe, like, the cereal companies. There's just no fun to be had here. I literally had to take breaks while watching this movie because I was bored and I wanted it to end. It was just so bad, and I wanted to like this movie. Like, I love Jerry Seinfeld. I like the cast. I think everyone, like, is talented. I just don't know what happened. It's really sad. I really don't know what happened in this movie. Number 1, The Firing Squad. Look, this is without a doubt the worst movie on this list. It's not even close, really. Not because it's the most boring, which it's not, actually. I'd probably rather rewatch this movie over any of the others, which is weird to say for my number 1 worst of the year. It's really just that on a filmmaking level, this is so bad. Like, I went to film school and I saw some pretty bad short films that people made. This movie reminded me of those, but, like, on a much more, like, I guess, high budget, and I don't know, like, where did these resources come from? This movie went to theaters. Like, I don't know how this got greenlit, how this got made, and then sent to theaters for people to watch. It's literally missing, like, frames of the movie. I don't know what happened here. Like, this movie, it takes place, like, I forgot what year it takes place in, like 2015 or something, and there's like a billboard for Avatar: The Way of Water in it, which came out like 2022. I mean, I talked about Parasite earlier, which is like so, attention to detail and like all this great stuff. The Firing Squad is the complete opposite of that. Like, it's no attention to detail, just, looks like it was shot on a phone, but not even like a modern phone, like an iPhone like 16 Pro Max or something. This movie looks more like what people think shot on Android looks like, which is just, very overexposed. There's no shallow depth of field. It just looks terrible, and it sounds terrible. Like, there's no good sound quality. There's just the scene where, like, someone starts singing Amazing Grace, and I was just laughing so hard at it because it was so funny unintentionally. This movie is like The Room levels of just bad comedy and like a drama. It's just so bad. It's the worst movie of the year by far, but I don't know. It's a movie I would actually rewatch to go see how bad it is again. Very weird movie. It's fascinating for sure, but I don't know. These are all bad movies. I really don't want to get too much more into them. I mean, I think I've kind of been brutal enough to them. Hopefully we have some good movies this year in 2025. I mean, so far hasn't been too bad. I'll say the Plankton movie is much better than the Sandy Cheeks movie, so that's a good start to the year. And I don't know, we'll see what happens, I guess. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve the show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.